compiled a list of 7 shows that will absolutely destroy your faith in humanity, if you had any left to begin with. These are all currently streaming on different places, and I will talk about where you can find them to watch right now. First up, number 7, we'll work our way down to number 1. Number 7, Muscles and Mayhem. It's the story of the American Gladiators. You can actually find this on Netflix right now. I remember loving this show as a kid. My favorite one was when they'd sit up there with that like big circle gun thing with the tennis balls, pew, 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 and the contestants would have to run between the different walls to kind of shield themselves. You must watch this documentary. I had no idea. It talks about, you know, their pilot episode, which was like a complete disaster, but then also the gladiators themselves. Wow, what a story. Number 1, they weren't compensated very well. Number 2, especially at the beginning, safety concerns weren't really taken into consideration when coming up with these ideas for battles or obstacles or things like that. So I mean, the show that we saw, or that I remember, was pretty polished, but it did not start out that way. If you were a gladiator and you got injured, bye-bye. Like, they didn't care. They just replaced you with somebody else. And the drug use, they were all on steroids. Now, at some point, little American Gladiator action figures became big, so they had a big following with kids. So there was a public concern of like, hey, are they on drugs? Because we don't want the kids like looking up to them. The gladiators were all called into a room, and I don't know if it was the producers or whoever, like said, like, hey, we're going to drug test you in 6 weeks. And it was kind of like a wink, wink, like, clean yourselves up within 6 weeks. So they were drug tested, and one of the gladiators, like, said, he's like, we were never given the results of those. So it's almost like they were able to tell the public, like, yes, we've drug tested the gladiators, but, well, what are the results of those tests? So on one hand, it was kind of interesting and neat to see, like, the behind the scenes and know the story behind it. But again, just thinking back to remembering how much I enjoyed that show as a kid versus what it really was, it makes you think. It's like one of those things where you look around at the current now and today, and you kind of wonder, okay, like 20 years from now, what's there going to be a documentary about today where I see things as one way, but it's completely like you have no idea what's going on under the surface. That'll get you thinking. Moving on to number 6, Operation Varsity Blues. This one is also on Netflix. This one, I think more people are familiar with this story because it involved celebrities, so it hit the news pretty big. This was the college admissions scandal. Probably the one off the top of my head is Lori Loughlin, who played Becky on Full House, and her daughter with the scandal. So I think everybody had heard about it in the news, but watching this documentary and just... it's like they did it because they could. Like, it almost didn't even dawn on them that there was like anything wrong with this. And I knew obviously there was like payments involved. Okay, well, they pay somebody and they get them into the school of their choice. But it went so much deeper than that. And they used sports almost like as a backdoor to get them in. So they had them, hey, we'll take pictures of your child like rowing to get them in on like the rowing team. They had never like rowed in their life. The saddest thing is the example that they were setting for their children. Like, this is okay. This is okay to lie and to cheat and to pay lots of money and make whatever you want to happen. So that one was pretty eye-opening as well. Number 5, Sins of the Amish. This can be found on Peacock. I actually became aware that this documentary even existed. I've been keeping up with, there's a House bill in Pennsylvania that is kind of working its way through the system, and I'm hoping it goes through. And other states have passed this bill, and what it is if you were sexually abused as a child, and the statute of limitations is passed for you to take action, it opens up a 2-year window for you to be able to take that action. So currently, I think like the statute of limitations has been like abolished, but people were not grandfathered in. So it's like if it happens today, if the abuse happens today, you have the rest of your life to take that action. Whereas in my case, happened at like 12 and 13 years old, that statute of limitations ended, a couple years back for me. So they want to open up a 2-year window so that those that were not grandfathered in have an opportunity to do that. So anyway, as this House bill was moving through, I don't want to say actors or actresses, they were, because it was their true story, they were part of this documentary, but the people from the film, Sins of the Amish, were there to show their political support of this bill and how important it is to have it go through. And I was like, oh, looked up that show, and oh my goodness, the abuse within the Amish community is bad. And so the thing that stuck out to me the most, and again, I recommend that you watch like all of these to get the full story for yourself, but there was a girl, abused, and she stepped up and stepped forward, and there were charges pressed against the Amish man. And in the courtroom, everyone in the Amish community, and not only from her like local community, there was busloads of Amish coming in from other states to come to court to show their support for this man. Not one of the Amish was in support of this young girl. And I'm just like, what is happening? It was pretty powerful. All of these just kind of open up your eyes to things that are happening that we just don't necessarily see on the surface. Number 4, Jared from Subway. So the documentary is called Jared from Subway, Catching a Monster. You can find this on Discovery Plus. Again, I think everyone's pretty familiar, and this hit the news pretty big that Jared, the spokesperson for Subway, was arrested for having child pornography and things like that. I had no idea how involved the story really was. So watching this documentary, there was actually a woman who was onto him. I can't remember like how that relationship or conversation started, but he was like revealing to her his attraction to children and kind of things, and she started recording their conversations, as proof. She took it to the FBI, and they wanted her to continue having these conversations with him, to, get more evidence, and she didn't want to. She wanted out. And the FBI turned around on her and said, well, you illegally recorded these conversations. So either you do this for us, or you're going to get charged for recording the conversations. So she was trapped, and it like consumed her life, because it was like these nightly phone calls. He was like asking about coming to visit her, and he wanted access to her children or friends of her children. So to hear this woman's story was just crazy. And I felt so bad for her. Like, she really wanted out. She didn't want to make those calls anymore. And meanwhile, while all this is going on, he's still on TV. He's still visiting schools. He's still hanging out with kids. But she wasn't allowed to say anything. And then finally, he was arrested and everything hit the news. And that's where, most of the society started following the story. But there's all this stuff before, and I'm like, wow. So again, watching this genuinely, like seemingly genuine person on TV, spokesperson, you just can't even imagine what's going on behind the scenes. Like, you can't trust anything anymore. Number 3, I just watched this one a couple days ago, Secrets of Playboy. So this can be found on Hulu. I didn't think there could really be any like secrets at Playboy, because like it was all just out in the open, like this is what we do, this is who we are. But it's so much worse than I ever would have imagined. And some of the former Playboy bunnies are part of this documentary, and they tell their story, and it's not what it seemed to the public eye at all. The Playboy Mansion had like their own security team, so it didn't matter, you know, if somebody was raped or if something happened, you couldn't go to the police. Like, that was well known. You don't go to the police. The security team of the Playboy Mansion would handle whatever. So Hugh Hefner was like very, very protected in terms of like nothing could touch him. There was drugs in and out of there, you know, and when you see all the bunnies, the Playboy bunnies there, you know, they looked so happy and thrilled to be there, and really that was not the case at all. You get to see in this documentary like how miserable they really were and what really went on behind the closed doors. That was eye-opening. Number 2. The Ashley Madison Affair. This is also on Hulu. So if you remember a while back, there was this, I guess, company called Ashley Madison. And it was a company where you would go to have an affair. The CEO of this thing, what a sleazeball. So watching this documentary and you see some of his interviews, and he's like, I didn't invent affairs. Like, he's capitalizing and making money on having guys cheat on their wives. I mean, you're always gonna have people out there that'll be out to make a buck no matter what. So it was almost like a dating app, dating site, but strictly just for affairs. And they prided themselves in keeping things secretive and things like that. And in the documentary, it talks about with Tiger Woods when he got caught in his affair. Ashley Madison reached out to him to see if he wanted to be a spokesperson. And even though I don't think there was any response from Woods, they were able to even just use his name and saying like, hey, Ashley Madison offered Tiger Woods to be a spokesperson. And I guess the joke was like, oh, well, you should have used Ashley Madison, saying, you know, he wouldn't have gotten caught then. And again, this is one of those things where like I knew it had existed. I think it still exists. Garbage. But I didn't know the whole story. So to see the man behind it, like, he is just awful. And then there was 2 major things with that. One being the company was hacked, and the names and personal information of all of the users were leaked. I mean, I almost don't feel bad about that one. So that was a disaster. And then so there was this guy they had interviewed that he was like an actual user of it, and he had gotten like messages from 6 different women, and they said the same exact thing. And none of them like called him by his name or his username or anything. It was just almost like copy and pasted. And that started like this questioning of like, are these women even real? So then they find out that the women on this site are like, they're bots. They don't even exist. So here's men that destroyed their family by cheating with a bot. Now I don't know that they were all bots. I think at some point, you know, they did have to eliminate that because I guess the cat was out of the bag. You'll have to watch the documentary and see how that played out. But it was just, it's crazy. And there was a lot of like famous people on that list that had been leaked. All right, number 1, this show, it is a must watch. If you are a parent, especially of teenagers or children that have access to electronic devices, you need to watch this show. Depending on what age your kids are at or your teens, they need to watch this show. It's called Undercover Underage. I've been watching it on Sling. Right now they are into season 2. It follows the team of Sosa. I forget what the first S stands for, but it's like online sexual abuse. And they're stepping in and trying to prevent children from being exploited online, and also educating the public. And this team, like, I think we're all familiar with, okay, sometimes cops will pretend to be like teenagers in chat rooms, and it'll actually be like a detective. But this goes so far beyond that. This team, I think they rent a house, so they have like teenage girl bedrooms set up, and they use like actual decoys, like actresses that are like in their early 20s, and can make them look like they're a teenager, 15. The one they had are playing a 12-year-old. And when they like FaceTime with, you know, the offenders with the lighting and things like that, they can pull it off. But it gives the best inside look at what these men are actually sending to children, how they are manipulating them. I wish that I had seen a show like this when I was 12, because I was that clueless young teen that had no idea what was happening and fell right into it. And when they put these decoys like into the chat rooms, it's just message after message after message after message. But it's like a cat and mouse game where they, you know, try to get just enough detail so they can find this person's identity. And then they do work closely with local law enforcement to take these guys down. That is my number one pick, Undercover Underage. So those are my top 7 shows that will destroy your faith in humanity. Sorry, not sorry. A lot of times the truth sucks, but that doesn't mean we should ignore it. So thanks for listening to my list, and I'll see you next time.